Hi everyone, I'm Amelia. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I want to share a story with you today, one that's taken me a long time to be able to tell without a knot forming in my stomach. A story about how the person I thought was my best friend, closer than family, completely undermined me when it mattered most. It's a story about betrayal, yes, but it's also about the quiet damage that happens when you prioritize someone else's comfort and reputation over your own worth. For a long time, I wore my loyalty to this person like a badge of honor, even when it meant erasing pieces of myself. It took a devastating blow to realize that true loyalty is a two-way street, and sometimes walking away from someone is the only way to find your own path. Maybe you've felt this way, like you've poured everything into a relationship, a job, a project, only to have someone else take the credit, twist the narrative, or just plain sell you out. It's a unique kind of pain, isn't it? The kind that makes you question your judgment, your value, even your sanity. My story isn't unique in the broad strokes. Sadly, betrayal is more common than we'd like to admit. But maybe hearing how I navigated the aftermath, how I was expected to protect the very person who hurt me, and how I eventually found my way out of that tangled mess, can resonate with someone else going through something similar. It wasn't a quick fix, and it wasn't easy, but reclaiming my voice and my work was the most empowering thing I've ever done. So, settle in. This is the story of how my best friend sold me out in our biggest pitch meeting, and how, for a time, I somehow ended up laundering their reputation until I finally decided my own integrity mattered more. Our friendship felt fated, in the way that certain connections do when you're young and idealistic. Sarah and I met in college, two ambitious women navigating the bewildering landscape of early adulthood. We clicked instantly. She was all charisma and big ideas, a whirlwind of energy that drew people in. I was more grounded, analytical, the one who loved diving into details and building things from the ground up. We were the perfect complement, or so I believed for years. We dreamed of starting something together, pooling our strengths to build a future. We spent countless late nights fueled by cheap coffee and shared dreams, sketching out business plans on napkins, imagining the impact we could make. After graduation, we went our separate ways professionally for a few years, gathering experience, but the dream never faded. We stayed in constant contact, cheering each other on, commiserating over bad bosses and frustrating projects. The bond deepened, forged in shared experiences and mutual support. When the opportunity finally arose to combine forces, it felt like the natural culmination of everything we had worked towards. We decided to launch a consulting firm, specializing in digital strategy. Her big picture vision and persuasive communication, combined with my meticulous research, data analysis, and implementation planning. It was exciting, terrifying, and felt absolutely right. From the outset, our roles seemed clearly defined. Sarah was the face, the networker, the one who schmoozed clients and charmed rooms. I was the engine room, the strategist, the one who built the frameworks, crunched the numbers, drafted the proposals, and ensured the actual work got done to an impeccable standard. We split the initial investment unevenly based on what we could contribute, with the understanding that profits would be split fairly once we were established. I put in longer hours, particularly in the foundational stages, handling administrative tasks, building our initial client base through sheer hard work and delivering results, while Sarah focused on visibility and prospecting. It felt like a fair division of labor, each playing to our strengths. Subtly, though, a pattern began to emerge. When initial clients praised the detailed strategies or the robust data insights, Sarah would accept the compliments graciously, sometimes saying, "We worked really hard on this," but more often just smiling and moving on to the next topic, leaving the impression that we primarily meant her. I didn't mind at first. I wasn't seeking the spotlight. I just wanted the work to be recognized for its quality. My satisfaction came from the problem solving, the successful execution, the tangible results we achieved for our clients. Sarah needed the external validation more, the applause, the recognition. I told myself we balanced each other out. As we grew, landing bigger clients became the focus. We targeted a major corporation, a contract that would elevate our firm significantly. This became our obsession for months. We poured all our resources and energy into crafting the perfect pitch. Sarah handled scheduling the meetings, networking with key contacts, building rapport. I handled everything related to the actual substance of the pitch. I spent weeks immersed in their industry, their challenges, their data. I identified a critical blind spot in their current strategy, something their own internal teams had missed. I developed an innovative approach, backed by extensive market research and projected outcomes. I designed the presentation deck, wrote the speaker notes, anticipated potential questions, and prepared detailed backup materials. This pitch was my intellectual property, the culmination of my deepest analytical work. I worked tirelessly, late into the night, often after a full day of managing our existing clients. Sarah was busy too, but her work felt different: more lunches, more events, more relationship building. We practiced the pitch together, refining the flow. Sarah was a natural presenter, articulate and confident. I briefed her on the key data points, the strategic rationale, the nuances of the innovative solution I had devised. I felt a quiet pride in what we had created, a blend of her presentation prowess and my strategic depth. This felt like our moment, the culmination of our friendship and our professional partnership. The day of the pitch arrived, a crisp autumn morning that felt charged with possibility. We were ushered into a sleek conference room overlooking the city. The corporate executives were formidable, sharp, and clearly pressed for time. Sarah took the lead, commanding the room with her usual charm and confidence. She introduced our firm, set the stage, and outlined the problem we were addressing. My heart pounded, a mix of nerves and anticipation. This was it. Then she started talking about the solution, my solution. She presented the critical blind spot I had identified, but framed it as an observation she had made during her networking. She unveiled the innovative approach, the one I had spent countless hours refining, but referred to it using slightly different terminology, subtly shifting the origin from a structured analytical process, mine, to an intuitive insight, hers. When she presented the key data points, the ones I had painstakingly gathered and analyzed to support our recommendations, she cited the general source but didn't mention the specific methodology or the depth of the analysis that had unearthed them. It wasn't a complete erasure, not overtly. She used "we" occasionally, spoke about our findings. But the emphasis was entirely on her. Her insights, her observations, her strategic thinking. The way she spoke, the ownership in her voice, painted a picture where I was the quiet support, the one who merely facilitated her brilliant ideas. The complex framework I had built was reduced to a simple concept she had envisioned. My detailed market projections were glossed over as supporting data she had requested. I sat beside her, my smile fixed, my body rigid, my breath caught in my throat. It felt like watching someone else take credit for painting a masterpiece I had created, while I stood silently beside them, holding the palette. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. My mind reeled, trying to process what was happening. Was I imagining it? Was she just nervous? But the subtle shifts, the careful wording, the way she accepted nods of agreement from the executives as if these were her original thoughts, it was undeniable. She was presenting my work as her own. The executives were impressed. They asked pointed questions, and Sarah, armed with the detailed answers and backup data I had provided her, handled them smoothly. She looked entirely in control, confident, the picture of a successful, visionary leader. And I was there, the silent partner, occasionally nodding along, offering a brief, almost superfluous technical clarification when prompted directly. I felt invisible. I felt hollowed out. The vibrant energy I had felt just moments before drained away, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. The meeting ended with handshakes and enthusiastic murmurs about next steps. The executives clearly saw Sarah as the driving force behind this brilliant pitch. As we walked out of the building, Sarah was beaming, already talking excitedly about the potential contract, the revenue, the future. "We nailed it, Amelia," she exclaimed, throwing an arm around my shoulder, oblivious to the chasm that had just opened between us. I managed a week. "Yeah, we did," my voice sounding foreign and flat. My mind was still trying to catch up to the reality of what had happened. How could she? How could the person I trusted implicitly, the person I had built dreams with, essentially steal my intellectual labor in the very moment that should have been our shared triumph? The pain was sharp and disorienting, like a physical blow. It wasn't just about the credit, it was the betrayal of our friendship, of our partnership, of the fundamental trust that had been our foundation. Back in our small office, Sarah popped champagne, celebrating the success she attributed largely to her presentation skills and networking. "Those executives loved me," she crowed, recounting their positive reactions. I sat there, nursing a glass of bubbly I didn't want, the sweetness cloying in my mouth. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to ask how she could do this to me. But the words wouldn't come. I was frozen, caught in a state of shock and disbelief. Later that day, when the initial euphoria had subsided slightly, I tried to talk to her. "Sarah," I started tentatively, "about the pitch. I felt like some of the parts about the strategy and the data, the core solution I developed, weren't really attributed to my work." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Amelia, don't be silly. We did it together." I said "we" plenty of times. "You know, I couldn't have done it without you doing all the background stuff. But someone had to be the face, you know? Someone had to sell it, and that's what I'm good at. It's a partnership. I bring the charisma, you bring the brains. We talked about this." "But it wasn't just background stuff," I pushed back, my voice trembling slightly. "That solution, the analysis, that was weeks of my focused work. It was my intellectual property. It felt like you presented it as your own insight." Her expression hardened slightly. "Now you're being ridiculous. We're partners. Everything we do is ours. You're getting credit. We're going to land this huge client. Isn't that enough? Do you need a gold star or something?" I handled the hard part, the pressure of being in front of those people, winning them over. "You just sat there. Don't diminish what I did." Her words twisted the knife. "You just sat there. It wasn't about a gold star. It was about acknowledging the fundamental contribution, the source of the value we were providing." Her response was classic gaslighting, dismissing my feelings, accusing me of being petty, minimizing my contribution while inflating her own, and twisting the narrative to make me feel ungrateful or demanding. I faltered, unable to articulate the depth of the hurt, the specific ways she had rephrased my work to claim it as her own. The conversation ended with me retreating, swallowing my pain, unsure how to fight against such a distorted version of reality. Over the next few weeks, the potential contract moved forward. Sarah was in her element, fielding calls, attending follow-up meetings, always presenting herself as the visionary leader who had landed the deal. I was relegated back to the engine room, preparing the detailed project plan, outlining milestones, budgeting resources, the essential, complex work that would actually make the project successful. The dynamic solidified. Sarah was the celebrated figurehead, I was the unseen workhorse. The contract was signed, a major win for the firm, and financially, a significant step up for both of us. Sarah received accolades. Articles were written about her leadership and foresight. I received a bonus, presented as a thank you for my support on the project. My name was barely mentioned, if at all, in the public narrative. It was soul-crushing. I started dreading going into the office, dreading interactions where people praised Sarah's brilliance, knowing that the core of it was my stolen work. But the truly insidious part began after the contract was secured. People started talking. Not the executives who signed the deal, They were sold on Sarah's performance, but colleagues, industry acquaintances, people who knew us, who knew my analytical strengths and Sarah's networking focus. They'd ask me, Amelia, that strategic framework Sarah presented? That was amazing. How did you two come up with that? Or, the depth of the data analysis in that pitch was incredible. Was that all, Sarah? This was where I was forced to become the laundromat for her reputation. Instead of saying, actually, that framework was entirely my design, or, I did all of the data analysis myself, I found myself hedging. I'd say things like, we collaborated closely on it, or, it was a team effort, we both brought different things to the table, or, I supported Sarah on the research. I downplayed my specific, critical contributions, using vague, collaborative language that allowed Sarah to retain the lion's share of the credit without me directly lying. Why did I do this? A complex mix of reasons. First, the firm was still our shared venture, and openly discrediting her felt like discrediting us, jeopardizing the success we had achieved. Second, years of friendship and a people-pleasing tendency made it incredibly difficult to confront her head-on and risk shattering the relationship completely. Part of me still clung to the hope that this was a one-off mistake, a moment of ego overriding judgment. Another part was simply exhausted. The emotional toll of the initial betrayal was immense, and the thought of navigating a messy public conflict felt overwhelming. So, I maintained the facade. I smiled at industry events when people lauded Sarah. I participated in interviews and accepted generic titles that didn't reflect the specialized, high-level strategic work I was doing. I deflected questions that dug too deep into the origins of our methodology. I became an unwilling accomplice in the erasure of my own contributions, polishing her image at the expense of my own professional identity and self-worth. The irony was a bitter pill. I was the one doing the difficult, technical work that formed the backbone of our success, and I was the one doing the emotional labor of maintaining the public narrative that minimized my role and amplified hers. I was exploited financially through the uneven distribution of credit and potentially future opportunities, and exploited emotionally by being forced into a position where I had to suppress my truth and actively protect the person who had hurt me. This period of internal conflict and forced performance was incredibly damaging. I felt like a fraud. Every time I deflected a question or offered a vague answer, a little piece of my integrity chipped away. I started to internalize the narrative. Maybe I was just the support staff. Maybe my work wasn't as valuable as Sarah's ability to sell it. My confidence eroded. Sleep became elusive, my thoughts circling endlessly around the betrayal, and my complicity in masking it. I became withdrawn, losing my usual enthusiasm for the work itself. How could I be passionate about building strategies when the credit, the recognition, the sense of accomplishment were systematically diverted away from me? I considered talking to a lawyer, but the thought of the legal fees, the public battle, the potential destruction of everything we had built was terrifying. I felt trapped. Trapped by the partnership agreement, trapped by the public perception Sarah had so carefully cultivated, trapped by my own inability to break free from the patterns of our friendship. The breaking point wasn't a single dramatic event, but rather a slow, relentless accumulation of small indignities. It was another industry article praising Sarah for the innovative strategy she spearheaded. It was a potential client calling and specifically asking to speak with Sarah about the strategic vision, completely bypassing me, the actual author of that vision. It was sitting in a meeting where Sarah presented my detailed market analysis, referring to it casually as some numbers Amelia pulled together. Each instance was a tiny cut, but together they bled me dry. One evening, sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the detailed project plan I had just completed, the one built entirely on the strategic framework she had claimed, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I was pouring my life force, my intellect, my expertise, into something that was building her career, her reputation, her wealth, while actively diminishing my own. I wasn't just being overlooked, I was actively participating in my own erasure. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Sarah wasn't going to change. This wasn't a mistake she regretted. It was a pattern she was comfortable with, perhaps even saw as her right. She valued her success and public image far more than she valued our friendship or my contributions. And as long as I stayed, as long as I continued to quietly do the work and publicly protect her narrative, this dynamic would persist. I would remain in her shadow, a ghost in the machine, polishing the facade of her brilliance while my own light faded. That night, something shifted deep within me. The pain was still there, a heavy ache in my chest, but beneath it, a flicker of anger ignited, followed by a slow, steady burn of resolve. I deserved better. My work deserved recognition. I deserved to stand in my own light, to own my achievements without apology or obfuscation. The cost of staying, the cost of continuing to launder her reputation, was the destruction of my own soul. That price was too high. The decision crystallized. I had to leave. Not just the partnership, but the entire toxic dynamic. I couldn't collaborate with someone who treated me this way, who so easily discarded my value. I couldn't continue to live a professional life where I had to censor myself and protect her narrative. It was terrifying, walking away from something I had invested so much into, something that was finally achieving a level of success. But the alternative, staying and slowly disappearing, was even more frightening. The next morning, I drafted an email to Sarah. It was difficult, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I deleted and rewrote sentences countless times, trying to find the right balance between stating my truth and maintaining a degree of professionalism. Ultimately, I decided against an email. This needed to be a direct conversation, as difficult as it would be. I scheduled a meeting for the end of the week. The days leading up to the meeting were agonizing. I rehearsed what I would say, anticipating her reactions. I knew she would be defensive, angry, perhaps even try to manipulate me. I braced myself. I also started gathering documentation of my specific contributions, the original drafts of proposals, the raw data sets I had analyzed, the detailed plans I had created. Not with the intention of necessarily using them against her, but as a quiet assertion of my ownership, a reminder to myself of the tangible work I had done. When the day arrived, I walked into our office conference room, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. Sarah was already there, looking relaxed, flipping through a magazine. She looked up with a casual smile. "Hey, Amelia, what's up? You wanted to chat?" I sat down across from her, took a deep breath, and began. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about the partnership, and specifically, about the pitch meeting for the new client, and everything that's happened since." Her smile faltered slightly. "Okay, Sarah." I continued, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "In that pitch, you presented the core strategic solution, the data analysis, and the innovative framework that I developed. And you presented it as your own work. You took credit for my intellectual property, for weeks of my dedicated labor." Her eyes widened, a performative look of shock. "What? That's ridiculous, Amelia. I already told you we did it together." I said we. "You said we," I acknowledged, "but you consistently framed the key insights and solutions as coming from your vision, your observations, your thinking. You diminished my role to doing background stuff or pulling numbers. You know how much work I put into identifying that blind spot, into developing that framework, into analyzing that data. That was my work, Sarah, and you claimed it." She leaned back, crossing her arms, her face shifting from feigned shock to annoyance. "Oh, here we go. I knew this was coming. You're always so sensitive about credit." "I did the hard part, Amelia. I stood in front of those executives. I sold it. That's a skill too, you know. You can't just hide away doing research and expect to get all the glory." "It's not about glory," I said, my voice rising slightly. "It's about honesty. It's about partnership." A true partner doesn't take credit for the other person's fundamental contribution. And what's worse, since then, I've had to stand by and listen to people praise you for my work, and I've even found myself downplaying my role to protect your image. I've been laundering your reputation, Sarah, because you put me in that position. Laundering my reputation? She scoffed, sitting forward again, her tone dismissive. Don't be so dramatic. I've been building our business. Our reputation. You just don't like that I'm better at the public-facing stuff. Maybe you're just jealous. Jealousy has nothing to do with it, I countered, refusing to be drawn into her deflection. This is about integrity. This is about trust. You betrayed my trust, Sarah. You betrayed our friendship, and I can't stay in a partnership where I'm not valued, where my work is stolen, and where I'm expected to cover for it. I took another deep breath, steeling myself. So, I'm leaving the firm. I'm dissolving the partnership. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Sarah stared at me, the nonchalance gone, replaced by genuine surprise and a flicker of panic. Leaving? What are you talking about? You can't leave. We have clients, we have the new contract. We're just getting started. I'm leaving, I repeated, my voice firm. I've thought about this extensively. I can't continue like this. I will fulfill my obligations on the existing projects that I'm currently managing for a transition period, perhaps 6 weeks, to ensure clients aren't abandoned. We'll need to discuss how to legally dissolve the partnership and separate our assets and client base fairly. I've already consulted with a lawyer regarding my options and the value of my intellectual contributions. Mentioning the lawyer seemed to snap something in her, her face flushed with anger. You consulted a lawyer? You're going to sue me? After everything I've done for you? You did for yourself, Sarah. I corrected her gently, but firmly. And I consulted a lawyer to understand my rights, because I need to protect myself and the work I've created. I'm not planning a lawsuit, but I need the dissolution to be handled properly and fairly. I want to move on. I want to build something new, something where my contributions are recognized and valued. The confrontation escalated. Sarah became defensive, then accusatory, then tearful, pulling out every manipulation tactic in her arsenal, guilt-tripping. I thought we were friends. Minimization. It wasn't a big deal. Threats. You'll ruin yourself. And attempts to renegotiate. Okay. We can talk about credit. Maybe I'll let you do more presentations. But her words fell flat. The spell was broken. I saw her clearly now. Not the best friend I had idolized, but a woman driven by ego and ambition, willing to step on others, even those closest to her, to get ahead. I remained calm, reiterating my decision, setting firm boundaries around the transition period and the legal process. I refused to be pulled back into the emotional drama or the false promises. I had spent too long being quiet, being compliant, protecting her comfort. Now, it was time to protect my own. Leaving the partnership was difficult and messy. There were legal negotiations, arguments over shared resources, and the awkward process of informing clients. Some clients understood immediately, recognizing the imbalance they had perhaps already sensed. Others were confused, having only interacted significantly with Sarah. She, of course, spun the narrative to anyone who would listen, portraying herself as the wronged party, the visionary abandoned by her difficult, ungrateful partner. For a time, it felt like I was fighting a battle for my own story, my own reputation. But I had learned a crucial lesson. I didn't need to control Sarah's narrative anymore. My focus needed to be on building my own future, based on integrity and the value of my actual work. I stopped trying to explain myself to everyone, stopped trying to counteract her spin. I focused my energy on setting up my own small consulting practice, starting from scratch. The initial months were challenging. I had less capital, fewer contacts, since many of our initial connections were Sarah's network, and the weight of starting over was heavy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned if I had made the right choice, if the security of the old, toxic arrangement wouldn't have been easier. But then I would remember the suffocating feeling of invisibility, the corrosive effect of constantly suppressing my truth, and the resolve would return. I reached out to a few key contacts who knew my work well and who had expressed discomfort with the previous dynamic. I was open and honest without being overly dramatic or slanderous about Sarah. I simply stated that the partnership was no longer a good fit for my professional goals and values, and I was now offering my strategic and analytical services independently. My focus was on the quality of my work, the depth of my analysis, the tangible results I could deliver. Slowly, tentatively, clients started to come. Not the big, splashy contracts Sarah was pursuing and leveraging my stolen framework for, but smaller, meaningful projects where clients specifically sought out my expertise in strategic planning, data analysis, and implementation. These clients valued my meticulousness, my integrity, and the directness of working with the person who was actually doing the core intellectual work. Every project I completed on my own was a small victory, a brick laid in the foundation of my new professional identity. I no longer had to dilute my achievements or speak in vague wheeze. I could proudly say, "This is the strategy I developed," or "This is the analysis I conducted." It was liberating. The knot in my stomach began to loosen. The sense of being a fraud dissipated, replaced by a quiet confidence in my own abilities. There were still whispers, of course, and Sarah continued her performance as the wronged party. But her narrative held less power over me now. I was no longer bound by the perceived need to protect her, to maintain a facade that erased me. My energy was channeled into building something real, something authentic, something based on my own merit. As I gained momentum, I started attracting clients who specifically appreciated my candidness about the value of detailed, often unseen, strategic work. They had perhaps been burned by charismatic consultants who delivered great presentations but lacked the substance behind them. They sought my grounded, analytical approach. My reputation grew not as the face of anything, but as the reliable, insightful strategist who delivered results. The financial success followed, not overnight, but steadily. It felt different this time. It was success earned through my own direct efforts, unburdened by the weight of someone else's ego or the need to hide my light. The validation came from clients who saw and appreciated the depth of my contribution, not from public accolades built on borrowed work. My relationship with Sarah ended completely. There was no mending, no reconciliation. The trust was irrevocably broken, and frankly, I no longer had the desire to be close to someone capable of such calculated betrayal. Letting go of the friendship was painful, a grieving process for what I thought we had and what I wished she had been. But it was also necessary. I needed that space to heal, to rebuild my sense of self-worth, and to recognize that true friendship is based on mutual respect and support, not exploitation. Looking back now, from a place of peace and professional fulfillment I built for myself, I see the experience clearly. It was a painful lesson in boundaries, self-worth, and the cost of silence. I spent years prioritizing Sarah's feelings, her image, her success, even when it meant minimizing my own. I participated in my own erasure, not just by doing the unseen work, but by actively helping her maintain a narrative that excluded me. The betrayal in the pitch meeting was the catalyst, the moment the quiet erosion of my value became impossible to ignore. But the real transformation came in the aftermath, when I chose to stop protecting her, to stop laundering her reputation, and to start fighting for my own. It wasn't a fight against her, not really. It was a fight for myself, for my right to own my work, to tell my story, and to build a future based on my own merits. The path was challenging, filled with uncertainty and hard work, but with every step I took away from that toxic dynamic, I felt stronger, clearer. I learned that my value wasn't dependent on someone else's recognition, and that true empowerment comes from within, from knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. It's a lesson I carry with me every day. Boundaries aren't selfish, they are essential for protecting your well-being and your integrity. Saying no to situations that diminish you is a form of self-respect. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that is breaking you, even if it's something you once loved or invested heavily in. My best friend sold me out. And yes, for a time, I laundered her reputation. But that painful chapter led me to reclaim my own story, my own work, and my own identity. I am no longer defined by that betrayal, but by the strength and clarity I found in its wake, and that, I know now, is a success no one can ever take away from me. So, that's my story. A difficult one, but one with a hopeful ending. I hope sharing this has been helpful for anyone who might be navigating similar situations, feeling invisible, or struggling with betrayal from someone close. You are not alone. Your work has value, and your voice deserves to be heard. What was your biggest takeaway from my story? Or have you ever experienced something like this? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and I find so much strength and connection in hearing your experiences too. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like. It helps me know what kind of content is connecting with you all. And if you're new here and want to hear more stories about navigating difficult relationships, finding your voice, and building a life filled with integrity and self-worth, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss my next video. Thank you for listening. Remember to value yourself, protect your peace, and never stop believing in your own power. See you next time.